you.
Thank you. Now, I think we just should start.
Yeah, I think so too. So, why am I here in the first place? That is probably a good question. I thought, since I'm from Munich and this conference is happening in Munich, it would be such a good chance to see a lot of old friends and acquaintances and people I've worked with. So looking back at my involvement in the Typo 3 project, obviously that is mostly a very good experience. I wouldn't be here if that wasn't it. But obviously there are also a lot of things that I learned from it, and many things where I think I did something that was a major fuck up. Some things didn't really work. So I would like to talk about those things a little bit, not about what other people did wrong, but specifically what I learned from it. And so for those who don't know me, here is a little primer, because who am I anyway, right? I joined the project in 2002. If Niels Teller is in the room, he would know exactly. I wrote some copy for the typo3.com website from 2002 to 2006 with a few others. If you want to name it that, I helped founding the Typo 3 Association at some point, and I helped improving it later. A few people are here today that know about this. Let's put it this way, I spent some time in the emergency room with Niels more recently. And generally, I'm running an agency in Munich, which is called DPool. But the most important thing here is I get to do a talk about mistakes. I mean, do you know how cool that is? I mean, I've never been doing that, and I don't know if you have ever, but I don't know, maybe I cannot recommend it afterwards, but at least I want to try, you know? Because usually you talk about things that go well, and how you did great, and the client did great, and everything was cool, and so on. And now I'm going to talk about those other things. So thank you for coming in, for volunteering to listen to this. Talk about mistakes with all its mistakes. And also, thank you to the organizers of the conference of having me, because obviously we're a software project, so we're all about success. Thank you. I want to start right out with the setting for the first mistake. I have only a limited time, so I didn't count all the mistakes I made, and I think we would be here and would be listening to me for a Fidel Castro run of a few days if I had to talk about those, so I made a selection. And the first one is the one that I'm going to come up with, and it has a setting, obviously, a very good one. In 2000, Casper releases Typo 3 in beta mode. In 2001, the first snowboard tour is taking place in Bad Gastein, the staple event of the community for a very long time. And the market is full of commercially licensed CMSs who are waiting to be, and this one goes out into USAP, disrupted. So what does this spell out as? It spells out as opportunity. And opportunity means I thought that now I'm going to invite a few people in the community and talk to them, and we'll get together and do a workshop and make a great plan for driving that disruption. So that was called the Accelerator in 2003. It's also called the Fashion Armageddon, which is because of this. There's the easiest question in this picture is spot the designer. He's actually quite easy to find. But you see that Matthias Mattes was already fully grown and so on. And and Casper was in his really best and Jesus freak years. Anyway, lots of good people on this picture, very fond memories. And during those 2 days, we came up with something that I would like to call the best worst plan. I didn't have place to put ever behind that, but I should have. You can also call it the mother of all backlogs, because basically we didn't take any drugs, but we felt like it because the opportunity was so good, and other than Weissbier, obviously. So, and what was happening is we got excited. We got too excited. We thought, let's fucking do this. And if you just look at that list, I mean, this is 2003, right? There is LDAP, there is DBA. I just realized there is another version of now with Doctrine in the current release and so on. So basically, what we thought was, and we had like 50 of those pages there. Let's build in everything cool we have ever heard about, regardless of us having an idea of what it entails, what it means, who is going to do it, or anything else. Let's change the architecture. Yeah, let's change the architecture. We have only one guy who's working on it. Don't care, let's do it. Let's create 2 new websites. We have nobody who's writing copy. We have a designer who said in the very beginning of the meeting that he's not going to do anything about the website design. So yeah, let's do that. Let's go international. That's a nice one. And that is, yeah, by the way, I mean, you know, on the side, let's change how the world thinks of open source. Okay, good, nice plan. Let's do that by Wednesday. Latest, of course. So what happened was people got nervous. We had a huge list of things that we wanted to do, and like the nice bear here, we were waiting for that snail-like thing to come out of the spaceship, and we got nervous, and everybody lost their nerve over the next few years, always repeating the same mantra. We're not getting there. We talked about this years ago, and now it's happening. You know, they couldn't even really celebrate when things were coming around. So the making plan things and building a backlog that we could not fill out in years for somebody who has actually had some training as a project manager, oh my God, that was a bad start, and it was my fault. So, titles. Okay, we're in Germany. Titles are a problem. And if you use them wisely, that is, if you have some fun with them, like calling somebody chief of staff, it is not that dangerous. Unfortunately, we didn't do that. So we baked a little formula, or I did, for mistakes. Titles, number 1. And so this is the setting. 2003, typo3.com is launched. We think real producers do press releases, right? I mean, it's 2003. People still believed in press releases. I know that's over. Because there was nobody else at that point, I nominated people who volunteer to distribute press releases in their home countries. There are a lot of errors built into that. And on top of that, I just take those that we have, and most of them have never done this before. Is this setting up for failure or what? And on top of that, I call them type heads. I'm serious. Type head. I mean, first of all, it sounds awful, right? It has nothing to do with typo 3. Secondly, it implies somebody is the head of somebody else or something in a community. Yeah? And then what it did on top of that, it gave everybody a reason to point at somebody else and say, well, he's the type head, he's going to, or she is, and she's going to. There is one notable exception here, and that is Sabina, who did a really good job about that. But for everybody else, it was just 2 big shoes for something that was actually not needed, and it created hierarchy in a place that was totally not ready for that, and rightfully so. Okay, you could say, could ask me, did I learn from this? Unfortunately not. I tried again, this time bigger. And it's, so I call that titles part 2, because that's the one thing that hurts a lot more. You could also call it the cornucopia, which in German is Füllhorn, for those who don't know. There is an old saying that stupidity lies in repeating the same mistakes but expecting different results, and this is proof of it. You can relax, Jürgen, it's not your fault, it's mine. So the formula for mistake, I think here is, we had 2 devs, Casper and Christian Juhl, who had an idea. We had 0 clients involved. They think it would be nice to be paid for work on typo 3 without clients, being in the mix and, you know, getting on your nerves. And finally, there was me as a mindless facilitator, drafting a structure, collecting money without giving control, votes, or anything in return. But to add insult to injury, that's not all. There is more. there was absolutely no time. We did the whole thing in like 2 to 3 months, and when I say we, there was mostly Adrian helping out with erecting that structure. And so that was drafted and founded in a matter of months. Everybody who would actually have a stake in it was informed after the fact, more or less. So that was a no feedback situation. Yeah, it gets worse, really. Its inception and structure was introduced Q&A style at the event that was the least suited for it. It was stabbed right in the heart of the project. Sorry, I got to laugh. It's so sad, but it's true. At the community event, the snowboard tour, and it had a snowstorm outside, but you know. So what this led to, everybody got titles. That was a serious birth defect, not only logically, but also there you had an open community. There was actually one guy who was he was the founder of it. And then suddenly there was this notion of hierarchy because there were titles. And that was such a huge mistake. It was so idiotic that from a point of view of today, I asked myself, how could that ever happen? And I don't have an answer. I don't know. I just have to say it was just massively off the chart there. Having now talked to Ben many times, Van Ende, who is a very seasoned community manager, I must say it is really crazy that I didn't try and everybody else involved didn't stop me and I didn't try to learn about this before. So, but that still isn't enough. Because next thing was, the whole setup was architectured anyway, if you want to, so that goats were positioned as gardeners. So they not only get titles, they only got money. They also got money. The formula for that mistake was most people on the board get funds that the board decides on. Read that again. Do you see the infinite loop coming up here? It's sad if it wasn't such a waste of energy and time. So that group carries on funding the same projects and people for a few years. And it's surprised about the resulting problems and communicates defensively. Yeah. Now, that sounds like a really bad idea. And there's some people in the room who were in it, some people who were looking at it, some people were challenging it. And I tried to find a metaphor for how it felt, and actually, to me, even then, it mostly felt like something like the Politburo in the good old Soviet Union. So it was not only like that from the outside, it was also feeling like that from the inside. It felt slow, and it felt bureaucratic, and it was no fun at all. And you were always on the defense, and everything was wrong about it. Thank God, eventually. So this is, by the way, Yuri Andropov having a funky day at his office. We got extremely stuck in bureaucracy with the same people, more or less, over and over, until, like in the Soviet Union, it was time for perestroika, thanks to people like Jürgen and Gina here. So there is actually a phase that maybe some of you remember where where open source and specifically the Type 3 project became a subject to research, scientific research actually. And they tried to get an understanding of what's so special about this community. They came up with a metaphor for it that they call Janus, which I believe is a very positive view on it. I'd rather call it eternal limbo. And the setting for that one, for the number 4, is that there are competing agencies like mine, supply people like myself to act on behalf of everyone. That would work beautifully if everyone were the same type of people, right? It is never possible to discern between self-interest and greater good. Practically every discussion ends when commercial interest is brought up, either as an accusation or stated out in the open. And dissent and differing interests were too often ignored from within the group. So science has a different view on that. That is the book, by the way, and I also have it here with me. I don't know if many of you know it. It's a sociology book, which is almost entirely inspecting the type of three, sphere, and so on. So if you're into these things, it's worth a look. And I found it now. It's been published on Google Books. So under that link at the bottom, if you're into such publications, you can find it without having to buy it. Since it's sociology, it's very confusing. Sociologists are the kings of linguistic complexity, and they are trying to describe society, and they're throwing language at the problem, which usually doesn't work too well for everybody who's not inside of that code. But sociology described that the limbo between non-profit and commercial motivations, read devs and volunteers and agencies and clients and so on, that would be a liberating thing. Okay, interesting. I don't know to which meetings they went, but I didn't feel that was the case. And that organizations on the whole, they say, don't matter as much for today's work environment anymore. And that, I think, is an interesting point. And I believe that somehow that is probably a lot more true today without me knowing so much about what's going on in the community than back then. So maybe they were right, but back at the time, I didn't feel like it. Actually, to me, it felt like this. So you have seemingly similar people trying to interact on the same basis without explicitly stating their view as stakeholders, also without not being offered a vessel for expressing their concerns and expressing their interest, expressing their ambition, which I find is a very important bit here. I'm not going to mention another bit on the whole for reasons of fairness, which is this one. But I would like to talk about the possible lessons. So the possible lessons, because they're lessons, it says lesson in the lesson learned in the program. I learned a few more than one, or at least I hope. Yeah, I don't know. I hope. So, note to self. Since quite a while now, coming to grips with the experience and everything that's happened inside of it, I'm really trying to take maximum effort in getting stakeholder buy-in and getting expectations clear. And that has been a huge challenge because I keep thinking everything is really obvious and don't we go in that direction? And yeah, well, what other options do we have? Now being a little bit older and only marginally wiser, I've started doing that and try to pass that on if you don't already know. I'm very, very careful with titles now in whatever I do, even with my kids. Head of toasting, breakfast, toasts, and so on. I try to make plans that take the capabilities and the capacities into account. Yeah, it's kind of an obvious one, isn't it? I thought so too, but it isn't. I'm choosing my battles more wisely. We'll try out this evening, I guess, but generally that's something I believe it has changed a little bit. And I learned that I'm totally distrusting my own judgment about structures. That's probably the biggest takeaway on the note to self things. But some things that seem even more important also on a personal basis. I think many things could have been avoided if I actually had made the effort to research everything about comparable cases and go much deeper into that. I think I was content much too early. I didn't do any interviews. Everything that's normal today in human-centered design or design thinking, all those things apply now for a long time also to management sciences and to also community management. And I think it's time to learn from these and be really serious about that. The next one is maybe even more personal, but still something that I find holds true in a professional environment as well. No matter how much you like people, don't protect them from the cost. Don't protect them from the truth at all costs. Now, I remember times when we were sitting in the somewhere in Switzerland and debating about what to do with the budget, and it was quite obvious that things didn't go to plan. And I remember there was a lot of group dynamics going on about not being as straightforward and adamant about the problems that were there, just because there was a very important emotional thing going on. And I know this has been described in psychology for a long time, but it's still so very hard to snap out of that. And I wish we had. Don't forget to have fun. I remember there were a lot of times, and still are today in business life, when it's not only fun, but if you can't see the fun anymore, anywhere near you, then probably it's time. And finally, so if you make mistakes, and I've made quite a few, try to outline a few others. I'm sure people here in the room have others that they find more remarkable, or maybe others to add to it. I guess I can't avoid, and also don't want to avoid, to accept, apologize, and learn from them, so that's why I'm here. And also to meet you. So, sorry, that's what I'm saying now. And even more thanks for having me and letting me say that. I have a thing to add, and that is I'm really very, very grateful for the brand platform project inside of Typo 3. Out of all the things that I've been involved in, this is probably the one I learned the most about, I'm still the most passionate about, the one that has given me so much confidence to actually take this forward, and it has become a part of my business practice since then. And it's due to having a chance inside the Typo 3 community to do that. And I think it's still one of the greatest assets that we have. This sentence and everything that's pertaining to it, that is somehow, to me, a synthesis of the spirit that's mostly stemming from Casper, but that has been borne forward by everyone. I still believe in it. Sorry that this is somehow kind of a cheesy moment here, but I kind of love it. And I'm very proud of having been there. But there was always something else as well. And I want to bring that up again, because I think you all know it, but somehow it's not there in the brand platform. It's somehow a bit missing. Not that I don't want to add or challenge it or anything, keep it, all fine. But there is something else, it's really important. And that is that from the very beginning onwards, and even now as we're sitting in this, or standing in this very nice hotel here, Typo 3 has been a challenger brand. There was something rebellious about it. Now I know it's the status quo in many industries in Germany and beyond. But it was innovative in a way. It offered a non-commercial offering alternative to the commercial market. And I remember that was so much fun being with you, Olivier, and other people here in the room at CeBIT, and knowing we were the rebellious guys. We were the ones who could say anything. We could do anything. We were the go everywhere people. And I thought about what epitomizes that moment or that thing to me, or where it was captured in some way. And I've unearthed something on my hard drive that is really very old, and it's also very near and dear to my heart because it's from 2003 at the snowboard tour, and it was a small opener video. So for those of you who weren't there or too young to be able to have been there, this is how bad videos were, and when you made them at home in 2003. And there are also a lot of software companies, or a few in them that you probably haven't even known about. But Vignette at the time was the biggest CMS maker anywhere, long gone. Like most of them are long gone. I went to New Mexico recently, and actually there's only Core Media and Typo 3 floating around, but everybody else is gone. You know, the people that we were sitting on in panel discussions with, I don't know where they went, but they're no longer there. So anyway, back to that. It's the rebellious spirit. It's that we do things differently, and I think it's really very important to keep that in mind, to keep it alive, and to go forward with that as well as everything else. Because what is now happening with a different structure and so on, without me knowing too much about it, is again trying to push the envelope of different structures that are semi-commercial and semi-open source. And that is exactly why we were interesting as a community to sociologists 8 years ago. And I think it's good to keep that edge and keep innovating in that space. So thank you, and here's the video. Good. No sound? Okay, thanks. That's it.